Usually, we like to ease into these deep dives, set the table,
Yeah,
maybe
yes.
throw on a metaphor or two to get our bearings.
Right.
But looking at the breaking news coming out of Mexico over the last 24 hours, I really don't think we have the luxury of easing into anything today.
No, we definitely do not. This is one of those moments where the ground just completely shifts under your feet.
We are talking, of course, about the news from Sunday. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, better known as El Mencho, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the CJNG. He is dead, killed by Mexican military forces.
And just to set the stakes for everyone listening right off the bat, this is not just a drug lord. This is arguably the drug lord of the modern era.
See, and that is exactly where I want to start. Because, we have seen headlines like this before. We saw it with El Chapo. We saw it with Escobar way back when. The government claims a massive victory, and everyone sort of pats themselves on the back. But I was reading the assessment from Eduardo Guerrero. He is a former security official in Mexico. And he called this undoubtedly the most important blow to drug trafficking in the history of the country. Which feels, I don't know, almost hyperbolic. Is it really bigger than taking down El Chapo?
It actually is, and here's why. El Chapo was a celebrity. He was a brand, but a Mencho. He was the architect of a paramilitary superpower.
A superpower.
Yes, he built an organization that didn't just traffic drugs, it challenged the state directly. So when Guerrero says this is the most important blow, he means that the Mexican government just decapitated the most aggressive militarized threat to its own sovereignty.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to move past that headline. They cut off the head, but my immediate thought, and I think what everyone listening is wondering, is what actually happens to the body? Because you don't just dismantle a multinational corporation by firing the CEO.
If only were that simple. You were actually looking at the exact inverse of that. When a CEO dies in a normal company, the stock might dip. When a figure like El Mencho dies, cities burn.
Let's talk about that reaction. Because the images coming out of Guadalajara yesterday were just terrifying.
That are chaos.
Right. It wasn't just a shootout at the hideout. We're talking about coordinated arson, burning buses, blockades across the third largest city in the country.
And it spread to the beach resorts, too. It's a statewide reaction.
But help me understand the logic here. If I am a cartel lieutenant and my boss just got killed, why am I drawing more attention to myself? Why burn down a bank or block a major highway? Doesn't that just invite the military to come down even harder?
It feels completely counterintuitive. Right. You would think they would just go to ground, hide out. But you have to look at this through the lens of narco messaging.
Narco messaging.
Yeah. Those blockades aren't tactical in the sense that they are trying to stop the army from advancing.
Yeah.
It is pure psychological warfare.
They're flexing their muscles.
They are saying to the state, we are hurt, but we are not broken. We can still shut down your capital city in 20 minutes. We can still paralyze your economy. It is a signal to the government that the cost of continuing this fight will be totally unbearable for the civilian population.
Wow.
And honestly, it's also a signal to rival cartels, specifically Sinaloa, telling them to stay away.
So it is a defensive mechanism disguised as this massive wave of aggression.
Exactly. But the truly scary part isn't the initial fire. We have seen these blockades before. The scary part is what happens when the smoke clears, because El Mencho was the gravity holding this entire solar system together.
Right.
Without him, we are looking at the potential fragmentation of the most powerful criminal organization on Earth.
And before we get into the whole messy question of who takes over, I want to unpack what exactly is up for grabs here. Because I went down the rabbit hole on the CJNG's business portfolio in our source material, and calling them a drug cartel feels almost insulting to their business model.
It really is. It is a conglomerate, a vast criminal enterprise.
We know about the drugs. Cocaine, meth, they are basically the kings of meth. But the agricultural side, the sources were talking about industrial-scale avocado farming.
The blood avocados.
Right, but how does that actually work in practice? Are they just taxing the farmers? Or are they actually running the farms themselves?
It is vertical integration. They started by extorting the farmers.
Yeah.
Paying a protection fee per acre. But then they realized, why just tax it when we can own it?
Cut out the middleman.
Exactly. So they started taking over the orchards, but more importantly, they took over the packing plants and the distribution nodes.
So they control the entire supply chain.
They dictate the market price in certain regions. And the beauty of avocados from a money laundering perspective is that it is a cash business with legitimate international exports.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you can mix drug money into avocado profits seamlessly. It is green gold that washes the dirty money.
That is just diabolically smart. And then I also saw the notes on gold mining in South America.
Same exact principle. They are running illegal extraction operations across the continent. Gold is the ultimate untraceable currency. You melt it down and it has no history.
No serial numbers.
Nothing. It solves the biggest problem cartels have, which isn't making money, it is moving money.
And the sources also mention human smuggling, right? Moving migrants into the U.S.
Yes, and not just from Central America. They are moving people from as far away as China. It is a highly diversified global portfolio.
It sounds like El Mencho built a massive logistics company that just happens to kill people.
That is a very accurate way to put it. And remember, this whole thing grew out of the wreckage of the old Milenio cartel back in 2009. El Mencho saw that the old ways, the regional family-style gangs, were just obsolete.
So he modernized it.
He built a paramilitary force with a global supply chain. He even managed to do something recently that completely terrified the intelligence community. He allied with the Chapitos.
No, that is the faction of the Sinaloa cartel, right? Their main rivals.
They're blood enemies. But late in 2024 and into 2025, while the Sinaloa cartel was fracturing due to infighting, the Chapitos faction realized they needed help. So they made a deal with the devil. They allied with CJ&G.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend?
Briefly, yes. But that alliance effectively made El Mencho the chairman of a monopoly. By the time he died on Sunday, he was sitting on top of the largest illicit power structure the world has ever seen.
Which brings us to the vacuum. He is gone. And in any organization, when the founder dies, you look at the succession plan. But looking at the CJ&G family tree and the reports, it seems like the authorities did a pretty good job of pruning it beforehand.
They systematically dismantled the dynasty. This is what we call the dynastic trap of cartels. You only trust your blood, but your blood is the easiest thing for the police to track.
So what about the son?
Reuben.
Mm.
He was the heir apparent, top commander. But he was extradited to the U.S. back in 2020. He's in a Supermax facility, probably never seeing the sun again.
The brothers?
Several of them are already in custody. The bench is basically empty.
Well, there's one person left who seems to have the resume. His widow, Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia. The sources say she is the financial brain behind the whole operation. She is the daughter of a drug lord herself, so she grew up in this. She knows where the bodies and the money are buried.
On paper, she is absolutely the most qualified successor. She controls the purse strings. And in a mercenary army, if you cannot pay the soldiers, you don't have an army.
So why isn't she the obvious choice to take over?
Because of the culture. We have to be realistic about the environment we are talking about here. This is a hyper-violent, hyper-masculine world.
Right.
David Saucedo, the security consultant, points this out very bluntly in the source material. He argues that machismo is a structural barrier. The hitmen, the regional commanders, the sicarios are highly unlikely to take orders from a woman, regardless of her financial acumen.
That seems like a massive strategic blind spot for them, basically saying we would rather lose the war than take orders from a woman.
It is not rational. It is purely cultural. And that cultural barrier creates a huge crack in the foundation. If she controls the money, but cannot command the loyalty of the gunmen, you have a split.
And that leads us to the lieutenants, the middle managers with the guns.
Right. You have 4 key regional commanders who have been waiting for this exact moment. They run their own plazas. They have their own loyal crews.
And I assume they're not really the type to want a share of power.
Why would they? If you are the guy controlling the port of Manzanillo, which is a huge entry point for precursor chemicals, why would you bow down to the guy controlling the avocado fields in Michoacan?
Right.
Without El Mencho forcing them to play nice day, the natural incentive is to grab as much territory and power as you possibly can.
So we're looking at a civil war.
A war of succession, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is the part that is really bad news for Mexico. There is this grim concept in security studies called the Pax Mafioso, the mafia piece.
Which is basically better the devil you know.
Exactly. When one cartel is completely dominant, violence is targeted. It is just business. But when that cartel splinters into 4 warring factions, that is when the violence becomes chaotic.
Because they're competing.
Yes, and these smaller groups don't have the deep pockets of the main organization, so they turn to predatory crimes to fund their war. Kidnapping, extortion of small businesses, robbery.
So the death of the kingpin might actually make the streets less safe for the average person.
Historically, that is almost always what happens. The tense peace breaks, and you get anarchy.
This puts the new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, in a really impossible position. She has only been in office since late 2024, and she is inheriting a situation that feels like a total trap.
It is a trap. And she's trying to pivot away from her predecessor's strategy, which makes it even trickier to navigate.
Right, because Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, or AMLO, had the hugs not bullets policy, which, to be fair, was an attempt to stop the bloodshed by focusing on social programs.
It was an attempt to address root causes like poverty and inequality.
Right.
And the sources are very objective about this. While the intent was to avoid confrontation, the data shows it was highly ineffective for security. The cartels basically saw hugs as permission to expand. They took more territory because the government wasn't shooting back.
Just to be clear, for you listening, we are just reporting what the sources and the security analysts point out about the previous administration's policy. The data shows violence skyrocketed during that period.
Yes. So Sheinbaum has to get tough. She faces a war on two fronts now, with Sinaloa and Jalisco. But reading about her current strategy, it seems very divided.
It is a hybrid approach, and that is exactly where the friction lies. She has two main levers of power here. On one side, she has Omar Garcia Harfuch, her security minister.
He is leading the fight against the Sinaloa cartel.
Yes, he is the intelligence guy, the technocrat. He wants to fight this war with a holistic strategy, mapping financial networks using wiretaps, dismantling the structure from the inside out. It is very similar to the successful tactics used in Colombia.
Smart power.
Exactly. But then you have the military. And the military, by training and tradition, is a blunt instrument. They're the ones who led the operation against El Mencho on Sunday. They go in, they utilize overwhelming brute force, and they neutralize the target.
So you have the scalpel and the sledgehammer. Why can't they just work together?
Because they often actively undermine each other. Think about it. If Harfuch is spending months building a delicate intelligence map of a cartel cell, tracking their phones, watching their money, and then the military decides to just kick down the door and shoot everyone because they want a quick headline,
Then the intelligence is gone. The network goes dark.
the sledgehammer breaks the map. Precisely. And analysts are really worried about a lack of coordination between these two wings.
That makes sense.
There's a historic rivalry between the civilian police apparatus and the military in Mexico. If they aren't talking to each other, or worse, if they are actually withholding info from each other to take credit, then this succession crisis is going to spiral completely out of control.
It feels like Sheinbaum is trying to thread a needle while riding a roller coaster.
And doing it on two fronts. It is a massive stress test for the Mexican state.
Let's zoom out for a second. Because while Mexico's bracing for impact, the mood in Washington seems pretty celebratory.
Absolutely. For the U.S. perspective, this is a massive win. Politically, it shows that cooperation with Mexico is actually working. And operationally, there is usually a disruption dividend. When a cartel is fighting a civil war, it is much harder for them to coordinate massive international drug shipments.
So Washington assumes we might see a dip in the flow of drugs for a few months.
Weakened cartels usually mean a temporary reduction, yes. But there is a detail in the recent reports that is deeply concerning. It is the fentanyl connection.
Wait, I thought CJ&G didn't do fentanyl. I thought that was strictly Sinaloa's territory.
Historically, yes. CJ&G avoided fentanyl and stuck to meth and cocaine. They stayed in their lane. But recent U.S. intelligence findings show chemical traces linking CJ&G territory specifically to fentanyl busts.
So they were diversifying again.
They were preparing to enter the fentanyl market. And if the CJ&G, with their logistics, their discipline, and their global reach, had fully pivoted to fentanyl, that would have been catastrophic for the U.S. opioid crisis.
So killing El Mencho might have actually stopped or at least delayed that massive pivot.
That is the hope in Washington.
Yeah.
That the internal chaos prevents them from opening that new product line.
But this brings me back to the thing that is just so paradoxical about all these drug war stories. The balloon effect. The Hydra. We've been fighting this war for 60 years. We kill the kingpin. We arrest the lieutenants. We burn the fields. And yet
the numbers keep going up.
Exactly. The stats in the source material are staggering. 25 million people use cocaine worldwide in 2023. That is up from 17 million just a decade prior. Despite all the arrests, all the operations drug use is up, it feels like we are stuck in a loop.
We celebrate the tactical victory, but the strategic reality just doesn't change.
It is the ultimate paradox of the drug war. Diego Molano Aponte, he's the former Colombian defense minister, so he knows this dynamic better than anyone too. He had a quote in the research that really stood out. He said, "You cannot just kill the king."
Because the king is always replaceable.
Because the king isn't actually the business.
Yeah.
You have to dismantle the asset management and the middle chain of command. If the middle ranks survive, the business survives. It is the guy who knows which customs officer to bribe in Rotterdam. It is the accountant who knows how to wash the avocado money. It's the logistics coordinator who knows the trucking routes.
The institutional knowledge.
Exactly. If you decapitate the leadership but leave that middle layer intact, the organism survives. It just mutates, it rebrands, and often it comes back even more aggressive because the new leaders have to prove themselves.
So we are right back to the Game of Thrones scenario. The old king is dead, the middle managers are fighting for the crown, and the business itself, the actual flow of drugs, just keeps moving like a river around a rock.
That is the grim reality. The flow might get turbulent for a little while, but it rarely ever stops.
It is a really sobering place to land. We start with a headline that sounds like the end of something, El Mencho dead. But the deeper we dive into the mechanics of it, it feels a lot more like the beginning of something much messier.
Chaos is usually the next chapter in this playbook.
So if we are summing this up for everyone listening today, El Mencho is down. It is a huge symbolic and tactical win for the Mexican government. But the CJNG is a highly diversified, multinational conglomerate that simply will not vanish overnight.
Right. And Mexico faces a potential massive spike in violence due to these impending succession wars because their dynastic failsafe is broken.
Right, no son, no brothers, and a cultural rejection of the widow taking charge, which means we are likely seeing the end of that tense peace in Jalisco as the lieutenants go to war.
And all of this is unfolding while the Mexican government is testing a very divided security strategy. Sledgehammer versus scalpel.
It is an absolute powder keg, and I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over. We so often look at these kingpin takedowns as the final scene in a movie. The bad guy falls and the credits roll. But in the real world of economics, destroying a monopoly often just creates a highly competitive market.
Yeah.
And when the commodity in question is illegal drugs, a competitive market is a bloodbath. So does cutting off the head of the snake actually kill the snake, or does it just create a pit of vipers?
That is the question we will be watching play out over the next few months.
We certainly will. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep an eye on the news, stay safe, and we will catch you on the next one.